The Colorado dust swirled around Eleanor's boots as she stumbled toward the trading post, her vision blurring with exhaustion. 3 days without food, 2 without water. Her fingers trembled as she reached into her bodice, pulling out the last thing of value she possessed, her mother's sapphire ring. The only inheritance that bastard hadn't managed to steal before she fled Kansas City. "Please," she whispered to the merchant, her voice cracking. "Just some bread. Some water. I can work." "Ring first," the man grunted, not even looking up from his ledger. Before you continue with Eleanor's story, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly means the world to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. And I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? At home? During your commute? Let us know in the comments. Eleanor's hand shook as she placed the ring on the scarred wooden counter. The sapphire caught the afternoon light, the same deep blue as her mother's eyes had been. The merchant reached for it with greedy fingers. "That won't be necessary." The voice rolled through the trading post like thunder over the plains. Deep, certain, commanding. Eleanor turned to find a man filling the doorway, blocking out the harsh sunlight. He was tall, powerfully built with shoulders that strained against his worn cotton shirt. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, gray as storm clouds, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Ma'am needs supplies, Davis," the stranger said, stepping inside. "Put it on my account." "Now, Colt, I don't run a charity." "Wasn't asking." Colt moved closer, and Eleanor caught the scent of leather, sage, and something wild. "Load up provisions for a week, and treat the lady with respect." Eleanor's spine straightened despite her exhaustion. "I don't need charity either. I can pay." "Gold isn't what matters here," Colt said, his gaze never leaving her face. Those gray eyes seemed to see straight through her desperation to something deeper. A woman alone in Colorado territory, half-starved, running from something or someone. That ring's worth more than food. It's worth your dignity. The words hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had acknowledged she had dignity worth preserving? "I'll work off the debt," she said, lifting her chin. "I cook, clean, mend." "Can you handle a ranch?" Colt asked. "My cook left 3 weeks ago. Hired hands are threatening mutiny over my attempts at stew." Despite everything, Eleanor felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "I once fed 30 railroad workers for 2 months. I think I can manage." "Then we have an arrangement." Colt extended his hand, calloused, strong, marked with old scars. "Colt Rollins. My spread's 5 miles north." Eleanor hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His grip was firm but careful, as though she were something precious that might break. "Eleanor Hayes." Eleanor. He said her name like a prayer, like it meant something. "Let's get you fed." The Rollins Ranch sprawled across a valley where the mountains met the plains, backed by pine forests that whispered in the evening wind. The main house was solid timber, built to withstand harsh winters. A barn stood nearby, horses nickering in their stalls. As Colt helped Eleanor down from his horse, she swayed, and his hands caught her waist, steadying her. "Easy," he murmured. "When's the last time you ate?" "I don't remember." Something dangerous flashed in those gray eyes. "Who did this to you?" "Does it matter?" Eleanor pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I got away, that's what counts." Colt studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Come on, let's fix the first problem." Inside, the house was surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's home. Sturdy furniture, clean floors, windows that caught the dying light. Colt led her to the kitchen and began pulling out bread, cheese, dried meat. "Slow," he warned as she reached for the food. "Your stomach needs to remember how this works." Eleanor forced herself to eat carefully, each bite an exercise in restraint. Colt watched from across the table, his presence somehow both overwhelming and comforting. "The bunkhouse has 6 men," he said finally. "They're good workers, respectful. But if any of them make you uncomfortable—" "I've dealt with worse than rough cowboys," Eleanor said, then immediately regretted the admission. Colt's jaw tightened. "You won't deal with worse here. You have my word on that." And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. The first week passed in a blur of work. Eleanor rose before dawn, firing up the cast-iron stove to prepare breakfast for 8 hungry men. The ranch hands were suspicious at first, a woman appearing out of nowhere, clearly running from trouble. But her cooking won them over faster than words could have. Colt was different. He treated her with a careful courtesy that both frustrated and intrigued her. He never crowded her space, never touched her unnecessarily. But she felt his gaze following her movements, watching with an intensity that made her skin warm. One evening, as she cleaned up after supper, Colt appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You don't have to do this," he said, gesturing to the spotless counters, the scrubbed pots. "The agreement was cooking, not—" "I pay my debts thoroughly," Eleanor interrupted. "Besides, I needed something to occupy my hands." "Nightmares?" The question was gentle, understanding. Eleanor's hands stilled in the wash basin. "How did you—" "I hear you sometimes, walking the halls after midnight." Colt moved closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "I know what running from demons looks like, Eleanor. I've done my share of it." She turned to face him, wiping her hands on her apron. "What were you running from?" "A war that took everything. A promise I couldn't keep." His expression darkened. "My wife died 4 years ago. Cholera. I was 200 miles away, buying breeding stock. By the time I got the telegram, she was already buried. I'm sorry. I swore I'd never care for anyone that deeply again. Told myself it was safer to be alone." He held her gaze. "But you make that a difficult promise to keep, Eleanor Hayes." Her breath caught. "Colt, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "Just telling you the truth. You deserve that much." Before she could respond, shouts erupted from outside. Colt moved instantly, his hand going to the revolver at his hip as he strode toward the door. Eleanor followed, her heart pounding. In the yard, torches blazed. 6 men on horseback surrounded the ranch hands, weapons drawn. At their center sat a man Eleanor had prayed she'd never see again. Her stepfather, Vernon Hayes, his cruel mouth twisted in a triumphant smile. "There she is," Vernon called out. "My wayward daughter. Eleanor, darling, time to come home. You've caused quite enough trouble." "She's not going anywhere." Colt stepped in front of Eleanor, his body a shield. "Turn around and ride out." "This is family business, stranger. The girl ran off with family money. I'm well within my rights to take her back." "I took nothing." Eleanor's voice rang out clear and strong. "Everything I had, you stole. The deed to my mother's shop, the money from selling her jewelry." "A daughter's property belongs to her father," Vernon sneered. "That's the law. The law also says a woman can't be forced into marriage," Colt said, his voice deadly calm. "And that's what this is about, isn't it? You had her promised to some friend of yours. What was the price, Vernon? What were you selling her for? Vernon's face flushed. You're harboring a thief. I'm protecting a woman who asked for help. Now I'm going to count to 3, and you're going to ride off my land. If you're still here at 4, I start shooting, and I promise you, I don't miss. The air crackled with tension. Eleanor held her breath, watching Colt's hand hover over his revolver. She'd seen him shoot during target practice with the ranch hands. He was fast, accurate, deadly when he needed to be. 1. Vernon shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his own weapon. 2. You'll regret this, Vernon spat. She's not worth dying for, cowboy. 3. The metallic click of a hammer being cocked echoed across the yard. But it wasn't Colt's gun. It was Eleanor's. She grabbed the rifle from inside the door, and now it was aimed steady at Vernon's chest. He said leave, she said quietly. I suggest you listen. Vernon's eyes widened. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw fear flicker across his face. This isn't over, he snarled, but he was already wheeling his horse around. His men followed, their torches disappearing into the night. Eleanor's hands started shaking the moment they were gone. The rifle wavered, and Colt gently took it from her, setting it aside before pulling her against his chest. She went rigid for a moment, then collapsed into him, her body trembling with reaction. You're safe, he murmured against her hair. I've got you. You're safe. He'll come back, she whispered. He always does. I should leave before. No, Colt's arms tightened. Running didn't work before, Eleanor. It's time to stand and fight. She pulled back to look at him. I can't ask you to risk your life for me. You didn't ask. I'm offering. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Stay. Let me help you end this. Why? The question came out broken. Why do you care? Because I see a woman worth saving, he said simply, and maybe because you make me want to break promises I made to myself. Their eyes locked, and Eleanor felt something shift inside her chest. A wall she'd built so carefully beginning to crack. He has 6 men, she said finally, maybe more, and he won't face you honestly. Vernon fights dirty. Then we'll be ready. Colt released her reluctantly, though his hand lingered on her shoulder. Tomorrow, I'll teach you to shoot properly. The ranch hands can keep watch, and we'll send word to the marshal in Denver. What if that's not enough? Then we'll figure something else out. Together. That word, together. It hung between them like a promise, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The next morning dawned clear and cold. After breakfast, Colt took Eleanor to a clearing beyond the barn, a row of bottles set up on fence posts. Show me what you know, he said, handing her a revolver. Eleanor checked the chamber like he'd taught her. Aimed, fired. The bottle exploded. Good, Colt said, but you're tensing your shoulder. Here. He moved behind her, his body warm against her back as his hands guided her arms. Eleanor's breath hitched, hyper-aware of every point where they touched. Relax, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Trust the gun. Trust yourself. She fired again. Another bottle shattered. Better. His hands slid down her arms, leaving trails of heat. You're a natural. Eleanor lowered the gun and turned in the circle of his arms. They were so close she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow. Colt, she whispered, I'm afraid. Of Vernon? Of this. Of feeling something when I swore I never would again. Her hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat. The last man who said he cared about me left me with scars I still carry. Colt's expression darkened. Show me. Eleanor hesitated, then slowly pushed up her left sleeve. Ugly, white marks crisscrossed her forearm, places where lit cigarettes had been pressed into her skin. "Vernon's idea of discipline," she said flatly, "when I didn't smile pretty enough for his business associates." Colt's hands trembled as he cradled her scarred arm, his fingers tracing the marks with infinite gentleness. Then he did something that made Eleanor's eyes burn with unshed tears. He bent and pressed his lips to each scar, one by one. "I'll die before I hurt you," he said against her skin. "That's not a promise, Eleanor. It's a fact." "I know." And somehow, impossibly, she did. He straightened, his hands moving to frame her face. "I need you to understand something. What you feel for me, it doesn't have to be anything right now. You don't owe me a damn thing beyond honest work. But I need you to know that I'm already yours. Have been since you walked into that trading post and tried to trade everything you had left just to survive." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "That's insane. You barely know me." "I know you're brave. I know you're strong. I know you stood up to 6 armed men last night when you could have hidden." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, making her shiver. "And I know that when you smile, really smile, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "I don't smile much anymore. I want to change that." His voice was rough with emotion. "If you'll let me." Eleanor reached up, her fingers threading through his hair. "What if I can't? What if I'm too broken?" "Then we'll be broken together." Colt's forehead touched hers. "But I don't think you're broken, Eleanor. I think you're healing, and I'd be honored to be part of that." She closed the last inch between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was tentative, searching. Colt made a low sound in his throat and kissed her back, but carefully, holding himself in check. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "Too fast?" he asked. "Not fast enough," Eleanor admitted, surprising herself. "But I need time. Need to take all the time you need." Colt pressed another soft kiss to her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." For 2 weeks, an uneasy peace settled over the ranch. The marshal sent word that Vernon had outstanding warrants in Kansas and Missouri. Confidence schemes, fraud, 1 count of assault. A deputy was dispatched to serve papers, but Vernon had vanished. "He's planning something," Eleanor said one evening, as she and Colt sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains, gold and crimson. "I can feel it." "So can I." Colt's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "But he won't catch us off guard again." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, marveling at how natural it felt. Over the past weeks, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day, talking late into the night. Colt had begun teaching her to ride, his patience infinite, as she learned to trust the powerful mare he'd chosen for her. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she said softly. "But I do, here, with you." Colt turned to look at her, his gray eyes intense in the fading light. "Eleanor." The words were cut off by a distant sound, crackling, popping. Colt's head snapped up, his body going rigid. "Fire," he breathed. Then louder, "Fire!" Smoke rose from the eastern pasture, orange flames visible even in the twilight. The ranch hands poured from the bunkhouse, grabbing buckets, shovels, anything they could use to fight the blaze. "Stay here," Colt ordered Eleanor, already running toward the barn. "Like hell," she muttered, grabbing a bucket and following. The fire spread fast, feeding on dry grass and summer heat. Eleanor worked alongside the men, forming a bucket line from the well, her arms burning with effort. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw Colt beating at the flames with a wet blanket, his face blackened with soot. Then she heard it, the terrified screaming of horses trapped in the barn. "Colt!" she shouted, pointing. He turned, horror crossing his face. The fire had spread to the barn's eastern wall, and the horses inside were panicking, the sound of their hooves against wood echoing through the night. Without hesitation, Colt ran toward the barn. Eleanor's heart stopped. "No!" she screamed, but he was already inside, disappearing into the smoke. Time stretched. Seconds felt like hours. Then Colt emerged, leading 2 horses, their eyes rolling white with terror. He handed them off to a ranch hand and plunged back inside. 3 more times he went in. 3 more times he came out with frightened animals. But on the 4th trip, part of the barn's roof collapsed with a deafening crack. "Colt!" Eleanor propped her bucket and ran. She found him pinned under a burning beam, his leg trapped, blood seeping through his jeans. His face was twisted with pain, and when he saw her, his eyes went wide. "Get out!" he gasped. "Eleanor, get—" "Shut up." She grabbed the beam with both hands, ignoring the searing heat, and pulled with every ounce of strength she possessed. It didn't budge. "Go slow," Colt gritted out. "It hurts." "I'll die before I leave you," Eleanor said fiercely, echoing his words back to him. She repositioned her grip, braced her feet, and pulled again. The beam shifted an inch, then another. Colt dragged himself free, crying out as his injured leg moved. Eleanor got her shoulder under his arm and hauled him up, half carrying him toward the door as flames roared around them. They burst out of the barn just as another section of roof caved in, collapsing into the space where Colt had been trapped. Eleanor didn't stop until they were 50 yards away, both of them collapsing onto the grass, coughing and gasping. "You stubborn, impossible woman," Colt wheezed, but he was smiling. "You could have died. So could you." Eleanor's hands shook as she examined his leg. The burn was bad, the break potentially worse. "We need to get you to the house." 2 ranch hands appeared, lifting Colt between them. Eleanor followed, her mind racing. She'd helped the camp doctor in Kansas, picked up enough knowledge to handle basic injuries. But this. In the house, they laid Colt on his bed. Eleanor cut away his jeans, assessing the damage by lamplight. The break was clean, thank God, but the burn was severe, already blistering. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Can't hurt worse than it already does," Colt said through gritted teeth, but his hand found hers, gripping tight. Eleanor worked carefully, cleaning the wound, setting the break, binding it with strips of clean cloth soaked in cool water for the burn. Colt's hand crushed hers, his breathing ragged, but he didn't cry out. When she finished, she wiped the sweat from his forehead with a damp cloth. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You saved 8 horses. Someone had to save you." Eleanor's hand trembled as she brushed hair back from his face. "You scared me when I saw that roof come down." "I know." His gray eyes held hers. "Because I felt the same when you ran into that barn after me." "I couldn't lose you," she whispered. "Not when I just found you." Colt pulled her down beside him, his arms wrapping around her, despite the pain it must have caused. Eleanor buried her face in his neck, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. "The fire wasn't an accident," Colt said after a moment. "Someone said it. Vernon. Probably." His arms tightened, but he made a mistake. He showed his hand too soon. Over the next 3 days, Colt healed with stubborn determination, refusing to stay bedridden despite Eleanor's protests. The ranch hands found evidence confirming their suspicions. Torch marks in the grass where the fire started. Boot prints that didn't belong to anyone on the ranch. Eleanor tended Colt's wounds twice daily, her hands gentle as she changed bandages, applied salve. Their conversations during these moments became more intimate, barriers falling away. "Tell me about your mother," Colt said one evening as Eleanor rewrapped his leg. "She was everything good in the world," Eleanor said softly. "Patient, kind, strong. She ran a dress shop in St. Louis, supported us both after my father died. When she got sick, Vernon appeared. An old family friend, he said. He helped with the medical bills, the shop, and when she died, I was so lost that I didn't question when he showed up with papers saying I was his ward." "How long before?" Colt gestured to her scarred arm. 3 months. He sold Mother's shop, pocketed the money. When I protested, he reminded me I was 17, alone, and completely at his mercy. Eleanor's hands stilled. "The first time he hurt me, I ran. He found me in 2 days. The second time, I made it a week. I learned to be smarter after that. You're 20 now, 22. It took me 5 years to save enough money, plan well enough to actually escape." She met his eyes. "Coming here was my last chance, if you hadn't helped me that day. But I did." Colt caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "And I'm not sorry. Even though I brought Vernon's trouble to your door, especially because of that." His smile was fierce. "Because now I get to help end it." The next morning, a rider arrived from town, the marshal, finally responding to Colt's earlier message. But he brought troubling news. "Vernon Hayes is claiming you kidnapped his stepdaughter," the marshal said, standing in Colt's study. "Says he has witnesses that you forced her to leave the trading post at gunpoint." "That's insane," Eleanor exploded. "Colt saved my life." "I believe you, ma'am," the marshal said gently, "but Hayes has money, connections. He's making noise about bringing in federal marshals, claiming this is interstate kidnapping. How much did he pay you to say that?" Colt asked quietly. The marshal had the grace to look ashamed. "Nothing yet, but he's offering a substantial reward for information leading to your arrest." "So you came to warn us," Eleanor said slowly. "Why?" "Because I've been a lawman for 20 years, and I know a liar when I see one." The marshal settled into a chair. "Hayes might have connections, but I have something better, the truth. I just need you to give me evidence I can use." Eleanor glanced at Colt, who nodded encouragingly. "I have letters," she said, "hidden in my bag. Letters from Vernon's previous marks. Women he swindled, families he destroyed. I stole them before I ran, thinking I might need leverage someday." "Get them," the marshal said. 20 minutes later, he was reading through a stack of correspondence that painted Vernon as a career criminal. Fraud, extortion. One letter describing how he'd forced another young woman into a marriage with his business partner before she managed to escape. "This is enough," the marshal said finally. "More than enough. I can have him arrested by tomorrow." "No." Colt leaned forward, his gray eyes hard. "He'll run again. You need to catch him in the act." "What are you suggesting?" "Let word get out that Eleanor's here alone, that I'm laid up with injuries, the ranch hands are gone to a cattle drive." Colt glanced at Eleanor. "Vernon will come for her himself. He's arrogant enough to think he can just take her." "Absolutely not," Eleanor said. "I won't be bait." "You won't be alone," Colt countered. "The marshal and I will be waiting, and this time We end it for good. Eleanor wanted to argue, but she saw the logic. Vernon would keep coming, keep threatening, until he was stopped permanently. "Fine," she said, "but I want a gun." Colt smiled. "Wouldn't have it any other way." They set the trap carefully. Word was spread through town that Colt was bedridden, that Eleanor was managing the ranch alone. The ranch hands were sent to the north pasture, visible but too far away to help quickly. The marshal hid in the barn with 2 deputies, while Colt positioned himself upstairs with a rifle, his injured leg propped on pillows. Eleanor waited in the kitchen, pretending to prepare supper, a revolver hidden in her apron pocket. She didn't have to wait long. Vernon rode up just after sunset, alone this time, clearly believing the rumors. Eleanor heard his boots on the porch, the creak of the door opening. "Eleanor, darling," Vernon called out in that oily voice she'd learned to hate. "Playing house, are we? Time to stop this foolishness." Eleanor stepped into the hallway, her hand in her pocket. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Yes, you are." Vernon drew a gun, pointing it casually at her chest. "Your Cowboy's upstairs dying, and I'm not leaving without what's mine." "I'm not yours," she said clearly. Vernon smiled, a cruel twist of lips. "You said that with my name still warm on your lips when you were begging me not to sell you to Clarkson. Remember that? How you sobbed and pleaded?" He took a step closer. "But you're saying it different now, like you actually believe it." "Because I do." Eleanor pulled out her revolver, aiming steady at his heart. "And you taught me something valuable, Vernon. You taught me that sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become more dangerous than they are. You won't shoot me. You don't have the spine." The shot rang out, but it came from upstairs. Vernon's gun flew from his hand, blood blooming on his shoulder. He howled in pain as Colt appeared at the top of the stairs, rifle trained on Vernon's chest. "She might not," Colt said calmly, "but I sure as hell will." The marshal burst through the back door, deputies flanking him. Within minutes, Vernon was in handcuffs, still cursing and threatening. "Vernon Hayes," the marshal said formally, "you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, assault, and attempted kidnapping. And that's just for starters." As they dragged him away, Vernon's eyes fixed on Eleanor with pure hatred. "You'll regret this. I'll get out, and I'll find you." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "You won't, because I'm not afraid of you anymore." She watched until the marshal's wagon disappeared into the darkness, carrying Vernon away forever. Then her legs gave out, and she sank onto the porch steps, trembling with reaction. Colt limped out, lowering himself beside her with a grimace. They sat in silence for a long moment, the enormity of what had just happened washing over them. "It's over," Eleanor whispered finally. "It's really over. Listen, it's over." Colt's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You're free." Eleanor turned to look at him. This man who had given her safety when she had nothing, who had taught her to be strong again, who had risked everything to help her stand and fight. "I'm not yours," she said softly. Colt's expression shuddered, pain flickering in his eyes. "I know. I never expected." Eleanor pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "I'm not yours," she repeated, "because you can't possess a person. But I'm choosing you, choosing this, choosing us, if you'll have me." The smile that spread across Colt's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "If I'll have you? Eleanor, I've been yours since the moment you walked into that trading post. I just didn't want to presume. She kissed him, cutting off the words, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude, hope, love. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Marry me," Colt said. "Not because you owe me anything, not because you need protection, but because I love you. And I want to spend every day of my life making you smile." "Yes," Eleanor laughed, the sound bright and free, a sound she'd forgotten she could make. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, the ranch hands serving as witnesses. Eleanor wore a simple blue dress that matched the sapphire ring she'd gotten back from the trading post, Colt's wedding present to her. As they stood before the minister, exchanging vows, Eleanor felt something shift inside her chest. The fear that had lived there for so long, the walls she'd built so carefully, they crumbled, replaced by something warm and bright and infinitely precious. Hope, love, home. When the minister pronounced them married, Colt cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes shining. "Together," he whispered, echoing the word that had become their promise. "Together," Eleanor agreed, and kissed him as the congregation cheered. 6 months later, Eleanor stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Her hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, a secret she'd share with Colt tonight. The ranch had prospered. The barn rebuilt, the pastures green with spring growth. Behind her, the door opened and familiar arms wrapped around her waist, Colt's chin settling on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "How different everything is now. How different I am." Eleanor leaned back against him. "A year ago, I was running for my life, starving, desperate, and now? Now you're home." "Yes." She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. That real, full smile he loved so much. "I'm home." Colt kissed her softly, tenderly, then more deeply, and Eleanor kissed him back, grateful for every moment that had led them here, for the courage to run, the strength to fight, and the wisdom to recognize love when it found her in the most unexpected place. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Eleanor thought about the sapphire ring now resting in a jewelry box upstairs, no longer needed to buy her survival. Because she'd found something far more valuable, a life built on trust, respect, and love. A life where she was seen, valued, cherished. A life where she'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be found. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in late autumn, carried by a rider whose horse was lathered with sweat from a hard run. Eleanor was kneading bread dough when Colt came into the kitchen, his face grim, the yellow paper clutched in his hand. "What is it?" she asked, wiping flour from her hands. "It's from my brother, James, in Wyoming." Colt's jaw tightened. "Our father's dying. Wants to see me before." He didn't finish the sentence. Eleanor moved to him immediately, her hand finding his. "When do we leave?" "We?" Colt looked at her with something like wonder. "Eleanor, it's a hard ride. You're 6 months along. And perfectly capable of traveling." She placed her other hand on her swollen belly. "Besides, you think I'm letting you face this alone? We're together, remember?" That word again. Together. It still had the power to make Colt's eyes soften, his shoulders relax. "It's not a happy reunion I'm riding toward," he warned. "My father and I, we parted badly. He wanted me to stay and work the family ranch. I wanted to build something of my own. Things were said that can't be unsaid. All the more reason not to go alone." Eleanor rose on her toes to kiss his cheek. "Go tell the ranch hands we're leaving tomorrow. I'll pack." The journey to Wyoming took 5 days, traveling slowly to accommodate Eleanor's condition. They stopped frequently, Colt's hand never far from her back, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of discomfort. At night, they stayed in small-town hotels, and Eleanor would lie in the circle of his arms, feeling their child move beneath her hand, while Colt's hand joined hers, his wonder at the life they'd created still evident in his touch. "Do you think it's a boy or a girl?" he asked one night, his voice soft in the darkness. "Does it matter?" "Not even a little." His hand spread protectively across her belly. "As long as you're both healthy, I don't care if we have 10 girls who all look just like their mother." Eleanor laughed. 10? Let's survive one first." "Fair enough." He kissed her temple. "But I'm serious, Eleanor. If anything happens during the birth—" "Nothing will happen." She twisted to look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I'm strong. You made sure of that." "You were always strong," Colt corrected. "I just helped you remember." The Rollins family ranch sprawled across a valley between two mountain ranges, even larger than Colt's spread in Colorado. The main house was imposing, 3 stories of timber and stone, built to last generations. As they rode up the long drive, Eleanor saw a man emerge onto the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, with Colt's same gray eyes, but darker hair threaded with silver. "That's James," Colt said quietly. "My older brother." James's expression was unreadable as he watched them approach. But when Eleanor dismounted with Colt's help, his eyes widened at her obvious pregnancy. "Little brother," he said finally, "you've been busy." "James," Colt's tone was wary. "How is he?" "Dying, sir. Like the telegram said. Doctor gives him a week, maybe less." James's gaze shifted to Eleanor. "Ma'am." "Eleanor Rollins," she said, extending her hand. "Colt's wife." Something flickered in James's expression. Surprise, perhaps approval. "Well, that's a change. Last I heard, Colt swore he'd never marry again after Rebecca." "People change," Colt said shortly. "Can we see him?" "He's been asking for you, obsessively." James stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Fair warning, he's not the man you remember. The sickness has eaten away at him, but his mind's still sharp, and his temper's still legendary." The house interior was beautifully appointed, but cold, lacking the warmth of a true home. James led them upstairs to a bedroom, where an old man lay propped against pillows, his once powerful frame wasted to skin and bone, but his eyes, the same gray as Colt's, burned with fierce intensity. "So you came," the old man rasped. "Didn't think you would. Thought you'd let me die without." He broke off, coughing. Colt moved closer, his hand finding Eleanor's, anchoring himself. "This is my wife, Eleanor." The old man's gaze fixed on Eleanor's belly. "Pregnant. At least you didn't forget how to do that much right." "Sir," Eleanor began, but Colt squeezed her hand gently. "Don't," he murmured. "He's trying to get a rise out of me. Always did." "Damn right I am." The old man, Samuel Rollins, managed a thin smile. "Someone has to keep you honest. You always were too soft, Colt. Too ready to see the good in people. That wife of yours, Rebecca, she had you wrapped around her finger. Probably would have bankrupted you if the cholera hadn't. That's enough." Colt's voice was deadly quiet. "You want to insult me? Fine. I probably deserve some of it. But you leave Rebecca's memory alone, and you sure as hell don't speak that way in front of my wife." Samuel studied him for a long moment. "There it is. That backbone I always wondered if you had. Took you long enough to show it." "Why did you ask me here?" Colt demanded. "To rake over old fights? Because if that's all—" "I'm dying, boy. I don't have time for games." Samuel's expression softened fractionally. "I asked you here because I was wrong. About Rebecca, about you leaving, about all of it. You were right to build your own life. I was just too damn stubborn and proud to admit it." The words hung in the air. Eleanor felt Colt's hand trembling in hers. "You called her weak," Colt said, his voice rough. "Said she wasn't strong enough to be a rancher's wife. That's why I left, Pa. Not because of the ranch, because you couldn't see what I saw in her." "I know." Samuel closed his eyes. "And I've had 4 years to regret every word. She made you happy. That should have been enough." Colt was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled up a chair, sitting beside the bed, Eleanor standing behind him with her hand on his shoulder. "Tell me about the ranch," Samuel said finally. "James says you've built something good in Colorado." And slowly, haltingly, Colt began to talk. About the land, the horses, the life he'd built. Samuel listened intently, occasionally asking questions, his gaze sharp despite his weakness. Eleanor watched the two men, so similar in build and bearing, so different in temperament, begin to build a bridge across years of silence and hurt. When Colt mentioned the fire, how Eleanor had saved his life, Samuel's eyes found hers. "You ran into a burning barn?" "He was inside," Eleanor said simply. "What else would I do? Most women would have let the men handle it. I'm not most women." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "And Colt's taught me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. It means knowing when to fight and when to trust others to fight beside you." Samuel studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You chose well this time, boy. She's got steel in her spine." "I know," Colt said softly, looking up at Eleanor with such love that her breath caught. "Believe me, I know." They stayed at the ranch for a week. Each day, Eleanor watched Colt spend hours with his father, talking through old grievances, sharing memories, slowly building something that might have been forgiveness. She also got to know James, who proved to be warmer than his initial demeanor suggested. "He's different with you," James said one afternoon as they sat on the porch while Colt was with Samuel. "Colt, I mean. When Rebecca died, he shut down. Wouldn't talk about her, wouldn't let anyone mention her name. We thought he'd never come back from that grief." "What was she like?" Eleanor asked. She'd wondered, but had been afraid to pry. "Beautiful, sweet, fragile." James chose his words carefully. She loved Colt desperately, but she was terrified of everything. Storms, horses, being alone. Colt spent most of their marriage trying to protect her from the world. When she died while he was away, it destroyed him. Not just the grief, but the guilt. Eleanor nodded slowly, understanding clicking into place. "That's why he's so careful with me. Why he watches to make sure I'm not pushing too hard." "Probably." James looked at her appraisingly. "But you're nothing like Rebecca. You're strong in ways she never was, and I think Colt knows that. I think that's why he can love you without drowning in fear." "I hope so." Eleanor's hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "Because I need him to trust that I won't break." "He's getting there," James smiled. "The fact that he brought you on this journey, 6 months pregnant, the old Colt would never have risked it." That night, Samuel took a turn for the worse. The doctor was summoned, but there was nothing to be done. As the family gathered around his bed, the old man's breathing grew labored, his grip on consciousness slipping. "Colt," he whispered. "Come here." Colt moved close, and Samuel's weathered hand gripped his with surprising strength. "The ranch goes to James. It's what he's worked for, what he loves." Samuel's voice was barely audible. "But there's money, a lot of it. Set aside. It's yours. For your family. For that grandchild I won't." He broke off, struggling to breathe. "Pa, let me finish." Samuel's eyes were fierce. "I'm proud of you. Should have said it years ago. You built a good life, chose a strong woman. You'll be a better father than I was." "You weren't so bad," Colt said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were hard, but you taught me the work, to build, to stand on my own." "To leave," Samuel corrected with a ghost of a smile. "Best lesson I gave you, even if I didn't mean to." His gaze shifted to Eleanor. "Take care of him, girl. He acts tough, but he's got the softest heart of anyone I've known." "I know," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "And I will, I promise." Samuel nodded, satisfied. His eyes drifted closed, and within minutes, his breathing changed, slower, shallower. As dawn broke over the Wyoming mountains, Samuel Rawlins took his last breath, his son's hand in his, finally at peace. The funeral was 3 days later, attended by what seemed like half of Wyoming. Samuel had been respected, if not always liked, and people came from miles around to pay respects. Eleanor stood beside Colt, her hand in his, feeling the grief rolling off him in waves, even as he stood stoic and strong. Afterward, the lawyer read the will. True to Samuel's word, the ranch went to James, along with the livestock and most of the assets. But to Colt, Samuel had left a sum that made Eleanor's breath catch, enough to expand their Colorado ranch tenfold, to secure their child's future for generations. He saved it, James explained quietly, every year, putting money aside, said it was for when you came home, though he never thought you would. "He knew I wouldn't," Colt said. "This was his way of saying I was right to leave, and his way of making sure you'd succeed." James gripped his brother's shoulder. "He loved you, Colt. He was just terrible at showing it while he was alive." They left Wyoming a week later, Eleanor eager to return home before the baby came. The journey back was quieter, Colt lost in thought much of the time. But on the last night before they reached Colorado, as they lay in another small-town hotel room, he finally spoke. "I never told Rebecca I loved her enough," he said into the darkness. "I spent so much time trying to protect her that I forgot to just be with her, to enjoy what we had instead of constantly worrying about losing it." Eleanor rolled over to face him. "And you're afraid you'll do the same with me?" Terrified, his hand found hers in the dark. "When you ran into that barn after me, when we rode into Wyoming with you 6 months pregnant, every time you push yourself, I feel this panic, this voice saying I should have stopped you, should have kept you safe. But you don't," Eleanor said gently. "You trust me to know my limits. You stand beside me instead of in front of me. That's not failing to protect me, Colt. That's respecting me. I know, up here," he touched his temple, "but in here," his hand moved to his chest, "there's still this fear that I'll lose you like I lost her." "You might." Eleanor's voice was steady despite the gravity of the words. "Childbirth is dangerous. Life is dangerous. We could lose each other tomorrow, or 50 years from now, but I'd rather have one real day with you than a lifetime of you hovering over me like I'm made of glass." Colt pulled her close, careful of her belly. "You're the bravest person I've ever known. I learned from the best." She kissed him softly. "And I need you to promise me something. Anything. When the baby comes, if something goes wrong..." She felt him tense and pressed on. "If you have to choose between me and the child, you choose me. Promise me, Colt." "Eleanor, promise me." Her voice was fierce. "I need to know that if the worst happens, you'll choose life. Choose to keep living, not just for you, but for me. Because I need you to be okay." Colt was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I promise, but nothing's going to happen. We're going to have this baby, and they're going to be perfect, and you're going to recover and be strong and beautiful and we'll live happily ever after." Eleanor smiled in the darkness. Something like that. His hand spread protectively across her belly. "I love you, Eleanor, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You brought me back to life when I thought I was done living. I love you too." She pressed her hand over his. "Now stop worrying and get some sleep. We have a long ride tomorrow, and this little one seems to think my ribs are a drum set." Colt laughed, and Eleanor felt the tension leave his body. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought about everything they'd survived. Vernon's cruelty, the fire, the journey to Wyoming and back. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together. Their word, their promise, their truth. Eleanor's water broke on a Monday morning in early December, 3 weeks before the baby was due. She was hanging laundry when the first contraction hit, strong enough to make her gasp and drop the shirt she'd been pinning to the line. "Colt," she called, trying to keep her voice calm. "I think it's time." He appeared from the barn so fast he must have run, his face going pale when he saw her gripping the clothesline pole, breathing through another contraction. "Now." But the midwife said another 3 weeks. Babies don't follow schedules. Eleanor managed a smile despite the pain. "Help me inside." The next hours blurred together in a haze of pain and effort. The midwife arrived within an hour, a capable woman named Margaret, who delivered half the babies in the territory. She examined Eleanor and nodded approvingly. "Strong contractions, good progression. This baby's eager to meet the world." Margaret looked at Colt, who was hovering anxiously by the door. "You can stay or go. Some men can't handle." "I'm staying," Colt said firmly. He moved to Eleanor's side, taking her hand. "If she wants me here." "Don't you dare leave," Eleanor gritted out as another contraction seized her. "I'm not doing this alone. Oh, God, that hurts." "I know, love. I know." "Oh." Colt wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, his other hand gripping hers. "You're doing beautifully." "Liar," Eleanor gasped. "I'm sweating and cursing and—" "Still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." His gray eyes held hers, steady and sure. "You can do this, Eleanor. You're the strongest person I know." Hours passed. The pain intensified until Eleanor was certain she couldn't bear another moment. But each time she thought she'd reached her limit, she'd look at Colt's face, see the faith and love and terror there, and find the strength to keep going. "Almost there," Margaret encouraged. "One more push, dear. Give me everything you've got." Eleanor bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed, Colt's hand crushing hers, and suddenly, release. The pressure vanished, replaced by the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. A baby's cry, strong and indignant. "It's a girl," Margaret announced, holding up a tiny, squirming bundle. "Perfect in every way." Colt made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Eleanor reached for the baby, and Margaret placed her in her arms, tiny, red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would be gray like her father's. "Hello, little one," Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." Colt leaned over them both, his hand gently touching the baby's head with infinite care. "She's perfect. You're perfect. God, Eleanor, we have a daughter." "We do." Eleanor looked up at him, seeing the wonder and joy and overwhelming love on his face. "What should we name her?" "I was thinking." Colt's voice was hoarse with emotion. Maybe Rebecca, after. No, Eleanor said it gently but firmly. Rebecca was your first love, and she'll always have a place in your heart. But this is our daughter. She deserves her own name. Colt nodded slowly, understanding. What about Sarah, after your mother? Fresh tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. Sarah. Yes, Sarah Rebecca Rollins. Both of them part of her, but she's still uniquely hers. Sarah Rebecca Rollins. Colt repeated, testing the name. He looked at their daughter, who had quieted in Eleanor's arms, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger. Hello, Sarah. I'm your pa, and I promise I'm going to do everything I can to be worthy of you. Margaret finished her work, declaring both mother and baby healthy. She's small but strong. Came early, but not dangerously so. You'll both need rest, but I expect a full recovery. After the midwife left, Colt helped Eleanor get comfortable, propping pillows behind her back. Sarah nursed hungrily, her tiny mouth strong, and Eleanor marveled at the fierce love already filling her chest. She's going to be stubborn, Colt observed, watching his daughter. Look at that determination. She comes by it honestly, Eleanor smiled. Between the two of us, she didn't stand a chance of being anything else. True. Colt settled beside them on the bed, his arm around Eleanor's shoulders, watching Sarah with an expression of pure wonder. I never thought I'd have this again. A family, a future. After Rebecca died, I was certain. I know. Eleanor leaned against him. But you do. We do. This beautiful, stubborn, perfect little girl and each other, and whatever comes next. Sarah finished nursing and dozed off, her tiny face peaceful. Colt carefully took her, holding her against his chest with the confidence of a man who'd helped birth countless foals and calves, but the tenderness of a father holding his daughter for the first time. Hi, sweetheart, he whispered to her. Your mother's the bravest, strongest, most amazing woman in the world. You're lucky to have her. So am I. He kissed the top of Sarah's head. I'm going to teach you to ride and rope and shoot. But more importantly, I'm going to teach you that being strong doesn't mean being hard, that you can be tough and tender, that you never have to trade who you are for anyone's approval. Eleanor watched him, her heart so full it ached. This man who had saved her life, who had taught her to fight, who had stood beside her through everything. Watching him hold their daughter, she fell in love with him all over again. Come here, she said softly. Colt carefully placed Sarah in the cradle beside the bed, then lay down next to Eleanor, pulling her into his arms. They lay together in the soft lamplight, listening to their daughter's quiet breathing, marveling at the miracle of her existence. Thank you, Colt whispered against Eleanor's hair. For what? For running into that trading post, for staying, for fighting, for this. His hand gestured toward Sarah's cradle. For giving me a reason to live instead of just survive. You gave me the same thing, Eleanor said. We saved each other, Colt. That's what love does. As exhaustion pulled her toward sleep, Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought them here. From desperation to hope, from fear to love, from running as standing and fighting. She'd lost so much before finding Colt. Her mother, her freedom, nearly her life. But what she'd gained was worth every moment of suffering. A home, a family, a love that made her stronger instead of weaker. A partnership built on respect and trust, and the simple, revolutionary idea that together was better than alone. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, blanketing the Colorado ranch in white. Inside, Eleanor Rollins drifted to sleep between her husband and daughter, at peace in a way she'd never imagined possible. The future stretched ahead, full of uncertainty and challenge and joy. But whatever came, they would face it together, always together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Eleanor and Colt's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.